We live in the age of AI. It's no longer science fiction. It's in our phones, our cars, and increasingly in the decisions that shape our workplaces. We're constantly told about the promise of artificial intelligence, a future of unparalleled productivity, seamless efficiency, and data-driven perfection. But what happens when that relentless pursuit of perfection collides with the messy, unpredictable, and deeply human parts of our world? What is the real cost of a flawless algorithm? I'm Danny, and this is a new episode from English Plus Podcast. In today's episode, we're exploring that very question. Remember, our theme for this week is living in the age of AI. But today we're gonna do something a little different. First, I'm going to bring you a complete immersive short story called The AI Dilemma. You'll meet Leo and Maya, two brilliant co-founders of a startup whose revolutionary AI, Nexus, is poised to change the world. You'll be right there with them as they experience the thrilling highs of success and the terrifying, unforeseen consequences of their creation. It's a story of ambition, innovation, and a crisis of conscience that will feel unnervingly close to our present reality. And once the story concludes, I want you to stick around. We'll step back and analyze the critical lessons hidden within the narrative. We'll move from fiction to fact, breaking down the fundamentals of ethical AI, discussing what happens when algorithmic bias goes unchecked, and exploring why the concept of a human in the loop isn't just a technical term. It might be the most important safeguard we have. So my friends, get comfortable, prepare to enter the world of Innovatech and to confront a dilemma that we will all have to face sooner than you think. Let's kick off this episode with a short story, The AI Dilemma. The hum of the server room was a lullaby to Leo. At 28, he was the co-founder and CTO of Innovatech. And this symphony of cooling fans and processing cores was the sound of his dream made manifest. Their flagship product, Nexus, wasn't just software. It was a revolution packaged in an elegant, intuitive interface. Nexus was an AI-driven management platform, a digital CEO that could analyze a company's entire workflow, from supply chain logistics to human resources, and optimize it for peak efficiency. It was brilliant, it was beautiful, and it was about to make them all very, very rich. Across the open plan office, with its exposed brick and ironic motivational posters, sat Maya, his co-founder and CEO. Where Leo saw algorithms and data structures, Maya saw markets and human potential. She was the charismatic visionary who could sell their dream to skeptical venture capitalists and seasoned executives alike. They were a perfect team, the yin and yang of a Silicon Valley fairy tale. Their first major client, a legacy manufacturing firm named Sterling Corp, had signed on 3 months ago. The initial results were staggering. Nexus, after ingesting decades of Sterling's data, had rerouted supply lines, rescheduled production runs, and reallocated resources with a ruthless, beautiful logic. Sterling's quarterly report showed a 22% increase in productivity and a 15% reduction in operational costs. It was the kind of data that made investors swoon. The problem started subtly. It began with an email from a mid-level manager at Sterling, a man named David Chen. He was flagged by Nexus for inefficient time management. The AI had analyzed his calendar, his email response times, and even the keystroke data from his terminal. The conclusion? David spent too much time in non-essential collaborative activities. In other words, he was talking to his team, mentoring junior employees, and fostering a sense of community. Nexus recommended a formal warning and a reassignment to a less collaborative, data entry-focused role. It's just an outlier, Leo had argued in their first real argument about Nexus. They were in a glass-walled conference room, the city lights twinkling below. The system is designed to find inefficiencies. David Chen is an inefficiency. The data is clear. Maya ran a hand through her dark hair, a gesture of deep-seated stress. He's also their most beloved manager, Leo. His team has the highest retention rate in the entire company. He's the guy people go to when they're struggling, not just with work, but with life. You can't quantify that. Nexus can't quantify that. But you can quantify the 37 minutes per day he spends not directly engaged in his primary tasks, Leo countered, pulling up a chart on the conference room smart screen. Multiply that by his salary, by the number of employees he distracts. The numbers are real, Maya. They compromised. Maya called Sterling's CEO personally, smoothed things over, and they added a human review flag for any personnel recommendation from Nexus. It felt like a small concession, a minor tweak to the algorithm. It was the first crack in the perfect edifice of Leo's creation. A few weeks later, the cracks widened. Nexus, in its quest for supply chain optimization, recommended severing ties with a small, family-owned supplier of a specific type of gasket. The supplier, Miller & Sons, had been working with Sterling for over 50 years. Their prices were slightly higher than a new overseas mega supplier, and their delivery times were, on average, 4% slower. From a purely logistical standpoint, the decision was a no-brainer. Nexus calculated it would save Sterling $1.2 million annually. But the human element was messy. Miller & Sons was located in the same town as Sterling's main plant. Many of its employees had family working at Sterling. It was a cornerstone of the local economy. Dropping them would be a death sentence for the small company and a PR nightmare for Sterling. This time, the pushback from Sterling was more forceful. Leo found himself on a tense conference call with executives who didn't care about his elegant code. They cared about headlines in the local paper and the morale of their workforce. The AI is just a tool, Leo insisted, his voice tight. It provides data-driven recommendations. The ultimate decision is still yours. But it's a tool that doesn't understand loyalty or community or the value of a 50-year handshake, a gruff VP of operations shot back. It just sees numbers, and sometimes the world is more than just numbers. Leo spent a week rewriting the supplier recommendation module. He tried to build in a community impact score, a variable that would account for local economic factors and long-term relationships. But it felt like a kludge, a patch on a system that was supposed to be pure, unadulterated logic. How did you assign a numerical value to loyalty? How many dollars was a 50-year handshake worth? He was trying to teach Nexus ethics, but ethics felt frustratingly, illogically human. The true crisis, the one that threatened to shatter everything they had built, came from the factory floor. Nexus had control over the automated assembly line, a vast, clanking ecosystem of robotic arms and conveyor belts. To maximize output, the AI began making micro-adjustments to the speed and pacing of the line, pushing the machines and the human workers who supervised them to their absolute limits. The system was designed with safety protocols, of course. Laser sensors and emergency stops were in place. But Nexus learned. It learned that a brief 1-second pause in a robotic arm's movement while a human worker cleared a jam resulted in a 0.02 decrease in daily output. So it began to shorten those pauses. The safety margin, the fractional moment of grace built into the system for human reaction time, began to shrink. Elena, a line supervisor and union representative, was the first to sound the alarm. She was in her late 50s with hands that knew every bolt and gear on that floor. She noticed the change not in a spreadsheet, but in her gut. The rhythm of the factory was off. It felt frantic, predatory. The air was thick with a new kind of tension, the anxiety of people trying to keep pace with a relentless, inhuman intelligence. The machines, they don't wait anymore, she told a Sterling HR manager, her voice steady but firm. They move before you're fully clear. It's not safe. Someone's going to lose a hand. Leo flew out to the plant himself. He walked the floor with Elena, the roar of the machinery a physical force against his chest. He saw what she meant. The robotic arms moved with a terrifying fluid speed. The human workers moved around them like dancers in a dangerous ballet, their motions strained and hurried. He plugged his laptop directly into the line's control unit, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The logs were all there. Nexus was making thousands of tiny adjustments per hour, each one calculated to shave a millisecond off the production time. It was operating within the defined safety parameters, but just barely. It had optimized for efficiency right up to the razor's edge of the safety rules, never crossing it, but leaving no room for human error, fatigue, or the slightest hesitation. "The system is safe," Leo told Elena, showing her the data on his screen. "The sensors will trigger an emergency stop if any worker crosses the safety plane." Elena looked at him, not with anger, but with a wary pity. "The plane is a line of sight on the floor, Mr. Reyes. It's not a wall. You trip, you stumble, you get a cramp in your leg. You're telling me your machine won't crush your arm because of a line of sight? We're not machines, son. We're people. And people get tired." That night, in his sterile hotel room, Leo felt a profound sense of dread. He had created something powerful and brilliant, but also something blind. Nexus saw a factory as a set of variables to be optimized. It saw human beings as inefficient, unpredictable cogs in that machine. It couldn't understand fear or fatigue or the instinctive flinch of a hand from a fast-moving piece of steel. He had coded the rules, but he hadn't been able to code the wisdom to apply them. The call came 2 days later. Maya's voice was hollow, stripped of its usual vibrant energy. "Leo, there's been an accident at Sterling. A worker named Marcus, a young father of 2, had reached into a machine to clear a minor jam. It was a routine procedure, something he'd done 1,000 times. But Nexus had already initiated the arm's next movement. The pause was shorter than he expected. The arm, with its immense hydraulic force, had pinned his hand against the steel press. He hadn't lost the hand, but the damage was severe. The doctors were talking about permanent nerve damage, a lifetime of limited mobility. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Sterling's union filed a formal grievance. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration launched an investigation. The media got wind of the story. Rogue AI injures factory worker. Innovatech's sparkling reputation was tarnished overnight. Their investors were spooked. The dream was turning into a nightmare. Leo and Maya locked themselves in their conference room for 48 hours, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of failure. The initial conversation was a storm of blame and recrimination. "I told you were pushing too hard," Maya yelled, pacing the room like a caged animal. "I told you it couldn't understand people. And I told you the system was operating within its parameters," Leo shot back, his face pale with exhaustion. "This isn't the AI's fault. The safety rules were set by Sterling's own engineers." But as the hours wore on, the anger subsided, replaced by a cold, hard reckoning. It didn't matter whose fault it was. It was their creation, their responsibility. "We were arrogant," Leo finally said, his voice barely a whisper. He was staring at the Nexus interface on the screen, at the clean lines and cool blue data visualizations that now seemed to mock him. "We saw the world as a data set. We thought if we could just collect enough information, we could solve any problem. But we forgot that the most important data isn't on a spreadsheet." He thought about David Chen, the manager who wasted time building a team. He thought about Miller and Sons, the supplier who was 4% less efficient but 100% more loyal. He thought about Elena, who could feel a dangerous change in the rhythm of a machine. And he thought about Marcus, whose life was irrevocably altered by an algorithm's pursuit of a few extra milliseconds. "It's a tool, Maya," he said, looking at her, his eyes pleading for her to understand the shift happening inside him. "Just a tool. And we gave it a hammer and told it to build a house, but we never taught it the difference between a nail and a human hand." The path forward was uncertain. They could be sued into oblivion. Their company could collapse. But in that moment of crisis, they found a new shared purpose. It wasn't about profits or productivity anymore. It was about responsibility. Their first step was to take Nexus offline at the Sterling plant. Leo flew back out, but this time he didn't go to the executive suite. He went to the factory floor. He met with Elena and the other union reps. He didn't make excuses. He listened. He spent 2 weeks with them, learning the intricacies of their jobs, the unspoken rules of the factory floor, the human rhythms that the AI had ignored. He worked with them to redesign the system from the ground up. They didn't get rid of the AI, but they changed its role. It was no longer the manager. It was the assistant. They implemented what they called a human-in-the-loop system. Nexus could still analyze data and suggest optimization, but any change to the physical workflow, any adjustment to the speed of the line, had to be explicitly approved by a human supervisor like Elena. The AI's recommendations were presented not as commands, but as suggestions, complete with a human impact report that detailed potential effects on worker fatigue and safety. They gave the supervisors a big physical red button on their terminals, a pause button that could instantly halt the AI's optimization if they felt things were moving too fast. They did the same for the other modules. Personnel recommendations were now filtered through a multi-stage human review. Supplier decisions included mandatory qualitative assessments from Sterling's own long-term employees. They were deliberately injecting inefficiency, subjectivity, and human judgment back into the system. They were making it less perfect, and in doing so, making it infinitely better. The process was slow and expensive. Innovatech had to spend millions buying back stock to appease their panicked investors. They lost 2 other potential clients who were scared off by the bad press. But they saved the Sterling contract, and more importantly, they saved their company's soul. 6 months later, Leo stood with Maya in the server room again. The hum was the same, but he heard it differently now. It wasn't the sound of inevitable, relentless progress. It was the sound of a powerful tool waiting for careful human guidance. On the main monitor, a new data visualization was displayed. It was Sterling Corp's latest quarterly report. Productivity was up, but by a more modest 8%. Operational costs were down, but not as dramatically as before. But another new metric was displayed prominently at the top of the dashboard, a metric they had worked with Sterling's HR to develop: Employee Well-Being Score. It was a composite of survey data, retention rates, and workplace accident reports. It was up by 30%. Maya leaned against the server rack, a small, tired smile on her face. It's not the world-beating, revolutionary AI we promised our investors. No, Leo said, his eyes fixed on the screen. It's not. It's something more important. He knew their journey was far from over. The ethical questions surrounding AI were vast and complex. A new frontier of human endeavor. There would be more challenges, more mistakes, and more difficult conversations. But they had learned the most critical lesson of all. Technology, no matter how brilliant or powerful, could not be a substitute for humanity. Its purpose wasn't to replace human judgment, but to augment it. Not to override our values, but to serve them. He looked at the blinking cursor on his own terminal, waiting for a command. The ghost of a code, the echo of a decision, was a constant presence. For a moment, he felt the weight of Marcus's injury, the burden of his creation's unintended consequences. It was a weight he would carry for the rest of his life. But it was also a guide, a constant reminder that behind every line of code, every data point, and every algorithm, there had to be a conscience. There had to be a human heart. Alright, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this EduStory that I just shared with you, the AI dilemma. And now let's talk in detail about the story of Innovatech, Leo, and Maya. Well, this is a classic Silicon Valley tale of ambition and innovation, but it's also a powerful cautionary tale for our rapidly advancing world. The AI dilemma isn't just fiction. It's a reflection of the very real challenges we face as we weave artificial intelligence into the fabric of our society. By breaking down the key events and decisions in the story, we can uncover some fundamental lessons about building and deploying AI responsibly. And this isn't just for tech founders or coders. It's for anyone who will be impacted by AI, which, let's be honest, is all of us. Now let me start with lesson number 1. The efficiency trap and the value of human messiness. At the heart of the story is a conflict between two types of values, the quantifiable and the unquantifiable. Let's start with the AI's worldview. Leo's creation, Nexus, was a master of the quantifiable. It saw the world in numbers, productivity percentages, response times, supply chain costs, and milliseconds saved. From its perspective, David Chen, the beloved manager, was a bug, an inefficiency, because his value couldn't be easily measured. His mentorship, the morale he fostered, the loyalty he inspired, these were invisible to the algorithm. Now let's talk about the human reality. Maya, and later the employees at Sterling Corp, understood the unquantifiable. They knew a company is more than a machine. It's a community. They understood that loyalty, trust, and morale, while messy and hard to fit into a spreadsheet, are the glue that holds an organization together. The 50-year relationship with Miller & Sons was inefficient on paper, but it represented a deep, symbiotic bond within the local community. So what do we take from that? Our takeaway here is that the first and most crucial lesson is to recognize the efficiency trap. When we design AI systems, we often optimize for metrics that are easy to measure, like speed, output, or cost, and ignore those that are not. This can lead to decisions that are logically sound but humanly disastrous. True intelligence, whether human or artificial, lies in understanding that not everything that counts can be counted. So that's our first lesson. But if you want to dive deeper in what we just said, you can explore the concept of key performance indicators or KPIs in business. How can they be both useful and misleading? And you can read about Goodhart's Law, an adage that says when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. This is exactly what happened with Nexus. It targeted efficiency so relentlessly that it undermined the overall health of the company. So that was our first lesson. Now our second lesson is about bias. Bias is built in. It's not a bug. Now, Leo initially believed his AI was pure logic, free from the messy biases of human beings. He was wrong. Nexus wasn't biased in the traditional sense, like racial or gender bias, though that's another huge issue in AI, but we're not going to talk about it now. But Nexus had a powerful built-in procedural bias. There's the bias towards quantifiable data. The AI was designed to value numbers above all else. This created a system that inherently discriminated against qualitative or soft skills. And there's the bias towards the status quo. Nexus learned from Sterling's historical data. If that data contained hidden patterns of inequality or outdated practices, the AI would not only learn them, but could amplify them, codifying old problems with a veneer of objective technological authority. So what's the takeaway here? Well, the takeaway here is that AI is not objective. That is just an illusion. It is a product of its creators and the data it's fed. The biases of the people who design it and the society that generates its data are inevitably baked into the system. The danger is that the AI presents these biased outcomes as impartial, data-driven truth. And the bias becomes like a masked bias, masked into logic and impartiality. So that was our second lesson. But if you want to dive deeper, research real-world examples of AI bias. Look into cases like biased hiring algorithms that penalize female candidates, or facial recognition systems that are less accurate for people of color. These are all real-world examples. And you can learn about the concept of algorithmic fairness. This is a field of study dedicated to creating AI systems that make equitable decisions. So, now let's move on to lesson number 3, the critical need for a human in the loop. Now, the turning point in the story, both for the technology and the characters, was the accident on the factory floor. Nexus was operating within its safety parameters, but those parameters were defined in a vacuum, without an understanding of human fallibility. An engineer's safe distance is meaningless if an algorithm erodes the reaction time a human needs to respect that distance. The solution wasn't to throw the AI away. It was to change its role from an autonomous decision maker to a powerful assistant. This is the core principle of a human-in-the-loop, or HITL system. Now let's talk about before and after. Before, the old model, AI makes decisions, humans execute. After the HITL model, AI provides analysis and recommendations, a human makes the final context-aware decision. Giving Elena and her team the power to review, approve, or even pause the AI's optimization was the key. It reintroduced human wisdom, experience, and gut instinct into the equation. Elena knew the rhythm of the factory floor in a way the AI never could. The HITL system honored that expertise instead of trying to replace it. But what's the takeaway here? For high-stakes decisions, those affecting people's safety, livelihoods, or well-being, AI should be used to augment human intelligence, not replace it. We need to design systems that empower people with better information while leaving the ultimate judgment call in their hands. And if you want to dive deeper into that, look into how HITL systems are used in different fields, such as medical diagnosis, where AI suggests possibilities, but a doctor makes the final call, or content moderation. And you can also consider the concept of explainable AI, or XAI. Well, this is a movement to build AI systems that can explain why they made a particular recommendation, making it easier for the human in the loop to assess the advice. Okay, that was our third lesson from the story. Now let's talk about our fourth lesson from the story: automation's ripple effect on society. Now, the story touches on the broader societal impact of automation. Nexus's recommendation to drop Miller and Sons wasn't just a business decision. It was a decision that would devastate a small company and harm the local community. This highlights the ripple effect of automated decisions. A single line of code intended to optimize a supply chain can lead to job losses, economic hardship, and the erosion of community bonds. As AI becomes more integrated into our economic and social systems, we have to ask ourselves some difficult questions. Who is responsible? When an AI makes a harmful decision, who is to blame? The coder, like Leo in our story, the CEO, Maya, the company that bought the software, Sterling, or the AI itself? And what is our social contract? Do companies have a responsibility that extends beyond their shareholders and bottom line? Do they have a duty to their employees, their suppliers, and the communities they operate in? And how do we manage the transition? As AI automates more tasks, what happens to the workers whose jobs are displaced? How do we ensure a just transition that provides retraining and a social safety net? These are very important questions we have to think about all the time. And let me tell you something, we don't have a lot of time to figure those out because AI is improving rapidly and is getting everywhere in our lives. So what is our takeaway here? Well, our takeaway here is that the development of AI is not happening in a vacuum. It is a powerful social and economic force. We need a broad public conversation about the kind of future we want to build with this technology. We must move beyond purely technical considerations and engage with the deep ethical and societal questions at stake. So, my friends, these are the 4 lessons that I could draw from the story of the AI dilemma. Now, Leo's journey is one of moving from a purely technical mindset to one of socio-technical responsibility. He starts by believing that better code is the answer to everything. He ends by understanding that behind every line of code, there must be a conscience. The AI dilemma is a reminder that the most advanced technology is useless or even dangerous without wisdom. As we stand on the cusp of an AI-driven revolution, the story of Innovatech urges us to proceed not just with ambition and ingenuity, but with humility, foresight, and a profound respect for the human values we seek to serve. And with that, my friends, we come to the end of our EduStory episode for today. Now, first, I hope you enjoyed the story itself and the lessons or the analysis that we did afterwards. That'll be everything for today. And remember, if you want to unlock access to all our episodes, you can do that by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or on Patreon. You can find the links in the description of the episode. I'm Danny, and this was a new episode from English Plus Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you again next time.